Hello, this is Women of the Future. We are now at episode 39, where we will be looking at today the subject of misogyny. Misogyny. If this word is new to you, I invite you to sit back and relax and listen to what Sister Denise has to say on the subject. As you have probably experienced already, Sister Denise is a mine of spiritual wisdom, and her take on the subjects that has been shared on the show is refreshingly different. Sister Denise, it's a pleasure to have you back again with us in the studio.
Thank you.
Misogyny, define it for us, please.
Well, it very simply means hatred of women. That you don't like a woman because she's a woman. You don't like women. Misogyny. There's no word for disliking men.
Yeah, that's a bit odd. Okay, is this a phenomena among certain societies, or is it just an illness that pervades humanity?
I haven't heard it called an illness before. That's a new idea. But it's definitely a phenomenon, and it seems to be big enough for there to be a word for it, and in several languages. It's definitely in French, the misogyne, a person who hates women. But it's like androgyny is also a little bit in the same category. Androgyny is having the masculine and feminine in an equal quantity. Being an androgynous person, you're equally male, equally female. And in fact, the aim of spirituality is to balance out the masculine and feminine side. And I think the existence of misogyny is a factor of the society being patriarchal and biased against women. And so this would engender feelings of antagonism towards women just because they're women.
Sister Denise, clarify this for me, please. I was under the impression that a misogynist is a man who hates women, or men who hate women. And now you're saying it's the phenomena of hating women, which means you get women who hate other women.
Well, you do get women who hate other women, but I'm sure that there may be a small number of examples of women who only go for men and they really, really don't like women. I think there's quite a few like that.
Is it the domestic environment that's to blame for women being hated? Is it bigger than the domestic environment?
No, I don't think it's really the domestic environment. I think that it's to do with the patriarchal system, which has to do with the legal system, the religious system, the social system, how the society is set up, who's in charge of the society, who decides what's okay and what's not okay. And a patriarchal society is defined by giving women a second or third class status as beings. And in fact, there are even some parts of the patriarchal society that consider women to be objects or equivalent of animals, or, you know, like a different species even. And so, you know, there they need a little biology lessons or something. But, you know, what I'm interested in really is the kind of internal resetting of the relationship so that men and women are complementary, balanced, closer to each other. And there isn't really any very good reason to hate women. But I think it's a sort of a hysteria that women are dirty, that women are bad, that the blood and menstruation, all of this stuff makes women hateable. And that's hysterical. But it is a phenomenon, and I think that in some parts of the world it's very strong, and it gives people reason to be violent towards women. And the phenomenon of violence against women is odd, really, because, you know, if you get rid of all the women, which happens, you know, there are some parts of the world where the gender ratio is skewed because of female infanticide and female feticide.
Yeah, there are a few countries that pop to my mind when you say that.
It happens quite a bit in India. And then what happens is when the young boys grow up, there's no young girls to get married to. So then what are you going to do, you see? So it's kind of very illogical, but it is a phenomenon that is there. And it's to do with superstition, it's prejudice, mental attitudes that are not based in any kind of rational or logical thinking. It's just something that you have received from your religious leaders or your social system that you grew up in, and you don't question it and you go along with it, and that's that, you know. And there are many, many people who just don't think. They just receive whatever the way is and they go with that and they don't think. No independent thinking.
So this is something that's passed down from generation to generation, and it's a kind of indoctrination?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, Sister Denise, we have looked at it from that perspective. Now I want to look at it from the woman's perspective. It's very damaging to a woman, a girl child, a teenager, a young woman and older woman who's born into a society and raised in a society of misogynistic men.
Yes.
And women. Now, what happens to a female psyche that has been exposed to this level of hate?
Well, you don't have very much sense of self-worth. You feel that you are unlovable, that you are supposed to be disliked. You feel shame that you exist. You keep apologizing for yourself. You make yourself available for others to use you and abuse you because that's what you've been trained to think, that that's what you're for. And so it's pretty miserable.
Yeah, that is a very bleak picture.
And the thing that I will sometimes slip into a little sentence is this aspect of reincarnation, which is that, you know, you're a man, but your last birth, you were a woman, and your next birth, you'll be a woman, because the soul changes, more or less, not totally, but more or less, changes gender every time it reincarnates, because the soul is genderless, and there is a balance. You may have a couple of lives as male or a couple of lives as female, but not really more than that. And people hate to hear that because they are so bent upon hatred of the other, you know, especially as men have hatred of women. So the very idea of me having been a woman or going to be a woman, they would rather kill you than hear that. But it is what happens when a soul reincarnates.
Then, when that happens, the wheel has to turn, doesn't it?
Well, yes, you see, so the man may have given women a really hard time, then he gets born as a woman. Some other man is going to give you, who used to be a woman, is going to give you what for. And the whole thing is just getting worse and worse. And so we have to break the cycle.
Okay, tell us how.
Well, I think that thinking of ourselves as persons, not men or women, is one way to intervene in this, you know, and relate to a person as a person, and think of the self as, you know, I'm genderless, a genderless person, and I happen to have a gender, and it's not the most important thing, it's just there, you know. So you're changing the priority. Your body is second in the priority, and your spirit, your self, your selfhood is primary.
Sister Denise, may I ask you to repeat the last part? That's quite lovely. Your gender, your selfhood?
Well, your physical body is not the most important thing. Your person, your selfhood is primary, your body is secondary.
Yeah, there are very few on the planet who see it like that, but that's a very beautiful stance. Okay, so somebody who has been subjected to misogyny from a young age, a female, how does she heal from that? There's something in her that says that this is wrong. I'm not how I was treated. I'm not my circumstances. How does she heal herself and put that right?
But she can't heal herself necessarily, but I think that as women start talking about it and start expressing their experiences, their feelings, sharing their stories with each other, first of all, you break the isolation, because you can only keep that going if you isolate women from each other. And so the patriarchal system does isolate women, keep them in the little box of the house, and set them up against each other and so on and so forth. There's quite an elaborate system for that. But once women start to get together, share their stories, support each other and so on, that setup doesn't work anymore, you see. So gradually it sort of loses its ability to survive, and this new sense of self, that I'm a person, and being in a female physical body, I will definitely use my capacities to support my, you know, those who are like me.
And how does this change things? They're not doing this to change the men's attitude towards them. They're just supporting each other to gain power?
Well, when you support each other, it means you don't internalize the misogynistic attitude anymore, you see. And so if something is sent to you, but you don't take it in, that thing kind of falls flat. So it doesn't have, you disempower it.
I like that expression, not to internalize the misogyny, because I think that's what happens to almost every female who is subjected to such abuse.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, Sister Denise, the act of looking at yourself as a person first and a woman second, that is such an empowering concept. How do you get there? How do you do that?
Well, what is a person? A person is a consciousness. A person is a mind. You know, I'm a mind. I'm aware. I am a personality. I have a constellation of talents and capabilities. I have light. I have dark. All of these things, they're the intangibles, but they're actually much more persistent than the tangibles, which are actually very ephemeral, because physical things come and go, they keep changing and so on, but the intangibles are actually more permanent. So you're shifting away from the material towards the spiritual, shifting from objects towards beings.
You mentioned the United Nations Declaration of Rights in a previous episode.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this subject? And
I think it's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
How can a woman use that to gain strength in such a scenario?
Well, first of all, the messages that she gets tells her that she doesn't have all these rights. And once you start reading the Declaration of Human Rights, you also being part of half of humanity as female, you know, or maybe slightly more, there's the list of your rights, including the right to not get married under the age of 18, the right to education, the right to not be abused, the right to proper due process in the court of law. There are so many rights And you sit down and read this. This is what your rights are. And then you see how most of those rights are denied to you. And then you start saying, wait a minute, these are my rights. Who are you people to deny me my rights? You see, it changes her sense of what her rights are. Because if she doesn't know her rights, if she's kept in the dark about her rights through being denied education, then she can't defend herself. But once she knows her rights, you know, so education is very important for women, and education is denied to women so that they don't claim their rights.
Is it ever a good idea for a woman to confront a misogynist head-on about his disgusting conduct towards her?
Well, you have to see the individual situations, you know.
Okay. In certain situations it's maybe a good idea, in other situations not.
You really have to see the situation, you have to see the capacity of both people and all the attenuating circumstances. You can't make a statement about a hypothetical thing.
I'm quite concerned about the number of women who have been subjected to this negative treatment from a young age, and now wants to, I don't know, do some self-repair?
Well, education, number one, connecting with other women, especially like-minded women, spiritual education, spiritual development, learning how to take power from a source that is beyond the material, starting to develop this eye, we call it the third eye, so that you can see through what's presented to you. Start to really think about yourself, who you think you are, what you want to accomplish, you know, and begin to empower your mind, because it starts there. It's very difficult for anyone to interfere with your mind, especially if you don't expose it.
The last part, tell us more about that. I really like that expression, empower your own mind.
Well, you know, we need to learn about thought. Now, sometimes when people, women, are treated badly, they resent it, and it creates all sorts of character defects because you're in a survival situation. And so when you're working with your mind, you have to really clean your mind from all kinds of resentment, negativity, and so on, because until you do that, you can't have a powerful mind. And then you have to start to bring in many different attributes of purity into your life. And once you start to practice purity on many different levels, you become a serious force to be reckoned with. But your powers, your inner qualities are intangible. And so you kind of start to shift to be on a different level from the other people. And that is going to be what you need to do to change everything about how you, as a person with a female body, are perceived.
That does sound very powerful, Sister Denise. Very, very powerful indeed. Okay, so you touched on this earlier, but I'd like to take it further. You spoke about connecting with higher power. You're referring to God, obviously. How does He help redress this imbalance within the damaged female psyche?
Well, God is the source of the information that people are persons, not bodies. That's the source of the information. That means God, as the intelligence, the supreme intelligence, is conveying to humanity that they've basically got things wrong, and is bringing new ideas into the mind space. And the more a woman catches these and starts to experience herself as a discarnate, non or genderless, colorless being. You know, you're a human being, and also you're a child of God. And so if somebody says, you're not a child of God, you're my child, you know, you say, no, I am a child of God. You produced my body, but you didn't produce me.
Sure. That creates an entirely different identity, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Is it a question of identity, Sister Denise? This misogynistic issue.
It is, you know, and the more you consider yourself and others to be not bodies, the question of misogyny doesn't really even arise, because it's irrelevant, you know. You're saying a person is their container, and a person is not their container.
That is a very refreshing way of looking at it. You regard the body as the container for the
soul, for the spirit.
Person is not their container.
How can you be your container? You have a can of beans. You throw away the can, take the beans.
Right. Okay. Never heard beans used in such a complimentary fashion, but there you go. Have
but
the
you know
beans.
what I mean?
Yes, of course I know what you mean. Okay, so we've come to the end of today's session. What would you want to share to our sisters, ladies, women all across the planet who have been on the receiving end of hatred by virtue of the fact that she's in a female body?
Well, you have to start thinking, I am not a woman. I am a person in a woman's body.
Okay.
You know,
and sorry, what you're saying is that in itself is a liberation?
Yes, it is, because you're asserting your personhood. You're distinguishing what you are from your container, and you're saying to other people, look, talk to me. There's somebody inside here, you know, it's a person who's just like you. So what are you talking about? You don't like women. It's a box. We're not talking about boxes here, we're talking about people.
Sister Denise, why is that? Why is the answer so shockingly simple? There's 7 billion of us on the planet, and the solution to the majority of the world's problems can be contained in one sentence. You're not your container. Why is it so shockingly simple, and why do so few people get it?
Oh, sense perception. You can see the box, but you can't see what's in the box.
Okay.
So we have to change our eyes. That's why we have this one, the third eye. Use the third eye to see through the box into what's in the box.
So there you have it, a fascinating half an hour. The note in which Sister Denise ended today's talk is that which stays with me the most. You are not your container, the container being the body. That is so shockingly and yet refreshingly simple to understand, and yet practically every single one of us on the planet fall into the mistake or weakness of just seeing the container and thinking that that's all a person is. So very powerful message for those of you who are the victims of misogyny. If you're hated by virtue of the fact that you're female, Sister Denise has shared the importance of creating a new identity for yourself, and that is something that you can do in your mind, and no one needs to know about it. So self-empowerment will bring external change. I really liked today's sharing, because it was so refreshingly simple and yet real and doable. I think it's doable. Sister Denise, thank you for your time, and I hope to see all of you again for the next episode. Cheers.